perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello, folks. I'm Harry Greenberger. I've been hosting this show for quite a long time. And today we have a guest who has been our guest on previous occasions because Marjorie Esman is the executive director of the Louisiana ACLU. And our organization, the New Orleans Secular Humanists, and the ACLU have one major point in common, and that is that we are great supporters of the separation of church from state and state from church. And so frequently, Marjorie comes on and we talk about the violations of that constitutional situation. Well, the one that happened most recently, and I'll talk about this, and then I'm going to let you do the talking.
Okay.
There was an announcement in the paper that said our governor, Jindal, was to host a prayer rally, which was to be held in a facility at LSU. And the sponsor of it was the American Family Association, a conservative Christian group based in Mississippi. Well, as I looked into that further, it appeared that Bobby Jindal wanted to have this prayer rally, and he had someone from his staff look for a religious organization to be the official sponsor. And they found this group in Mississippi. So anyway, when I saw all that, and I saw that it was going to be a religious event in a state facility, my concern was, are they giving them this facility to use? Are they giving them a bargain price? Which if they did not offer the same agreement to my organization, which is a nonprofit organization, then there would be possible action against the event. Well, lo and behold, and another day came around, and the Times-Picayune said LSU will get about $18,500 for having Bobby Jindal's prayer rally at the PMAC. So when I saw that, I figured $18,500 is probably a standard rate, and so I concluded that I had no right of action, except something else is happening. Some protest groups have been organized. They are protesting the Mississippi religious organization, which they have named a hate group. And so the protest action, which is going to take place at LSU on the day of this event, their protest is against that Mississippi religious group, which they call a hate group, because they're opposed to same-sex marriages and homosexuality in general.
This is the group that says that Katrina came here because New Orleans is such a sinful place.
Sinful place.
Right. So.
All right. Well, so that tells us what kind of thinking they have. All right. And so that's why these protest groups are calling them a hate organization, and they oppose abortion and other equal rights things. Our organization has signed up as a part of that protest, and I think there are other groups building to do that. So it won't stop the event, but it might get some media attention to.
Well, there's plenty of media attention, and there will continue to be, and I think it is important, as with anything, to have protesters have the opportunity to protest. That's what they do,
and to state their case. Yeah.
I do think there is still an open question, at least if this question's been answered, I'm not aware of it. But I do think, even though this group is paying what appears to be the standard rate for the facility, and they have the right to do that, there's still, I think, a question as to the extent to which Governor Jindal has allocated state workers to promote and facilitate this religious event, which is, after all, not state business.
What could be done about that? Could a lawsuit be filed?
Well, it would really depend on a lot of things. But if, in fact, the governor has been using a state employee on state time to facilitate a religious event that is not state business, there are a lot of ramifications to that, and I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's a piece that still remains.
All right. The newspaper report that said that this someone from his staff found these people in Mississippi said that same person is out scouting for Jindal to have prayer meetings in other states.
Right.
He still thinks he's going to be president, doesn't he? All right. Well, listen. Living in Louisiana, there are many instances, whether it's in public schools or the state legislature, where they're stomping on the Constitution.
Constantly.
The show is yours, Marjorie. Carry on.
Well, it's hard to know where to start because there's so much. But there was an incident a couple of months ago. We had a complaint from a family in Baton Rouge who had a couple of kids in high school. I think the son was a junior and the daughter was a senior in high school in Baton Rouge, and they were riding the school bus. And on one particular morning, the bus driver picked up the kids, dropped them off at school, and somehow detained the boy who was the junior, let everybody else off the bus, including his sister, who was able to see what was going on, although she couldn't hear anything. But the bus driver, for whatever reason, decided that she thought that this young man was gay, and locked him on the bus and gave him a religious lecture. Essentially was proselytizing to him about how he was going to go to hell and that he needed to go to church, and I think she told him what church he needed to go to. And the sister was outside watching her brother get increasingly distressed at being locked on the bus and having to listen to this harangue from the bus driver. And the mother had, of course, complained to the school. The principal said, "Oh, that's nothing we can do about that. You got to take that up with the transportation department." And the transportation department didn't seem to take it very seriously. At which point they contacted us, and we put together a letter to the school and explained what had happened and all of the ways in which this bus driver had violated the legal rights of this kid. And to their credit, the school system seems to have taken it seriously once we brought it to their attention, and they did apparently discipline the bus driver. They put a note in her file. They gave her some training. They have assured us that they will provide training to all school employees, not just teachers, but everybody, including the bus drivers, about all of the reasons why they can't give religious lectures to students based on anything at all, and why they have to protect the rights of students that they perceive to be gay. We don't yet know, and they refuse to answer when they're going to schedule the next training. We've asked them, and they have decidedly not answered.
Was this incident then well known throughout the school?
You mean at the time?
Or my question really is, this bus driver assumed the boy to be gay.
Correct.
Now, was that word circulated so the other students said, well, if she thinks so, maybe he is?
Oh, not that I know of. I don't think the bus driver was yakking to everybody about this. I mean, if that's the case, the family did not complain to us about that.
All right.
But whatever. I mean, certainly the other students saw that she wouldn't let him off the bus. It was essentially she kind of imprisoned him on the bus, and the other kids saw that. And, who knows what they thought about why she was doing this to this one particular kid.
But you are reasonably satisfied with the outcome of your letter?
Except that they won't tell us when they'll do the training. And, of course, we don't want a year to go by and have school employees not know what their legal obligations are. But yes, I mean, as long as they stepped up, they apologized, they disciplined the bus driver, they did what they could do.
Okay. Now, what else is happening in Louisiana?
Well, let's see. We didn't have a lot of complaints about, government-sponsored religious scenes this year. There was a question about a nativity scene in a park in Lafayette, but we don't know. As it's kind of like with the governor and his prayer rally, they can't prohibit it. They just have to allow everybody to do it on equal terms, and we don't know whether anybody else asked and was denied. So, these things crop up, but there wasn't a huge amount of that this year.
Now, what happened in our legislature that is actionable, or or that you think will be coming up?
Well, before I get to the legislature, because I do need to talk about that, but it's also important for everybody to know that on January 9th, there will be arguments at the U.S. Fifth Circuit on the three Fifth Circuit states, which is Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi, all three arguing the same-sex marriage issue at the same time on January 9th.
That's the court here.
Yes, the U.S. Fifth Circuit, yes. Is going to hear all arguments from all three states at the same time.
These are this case came to the court for people who were trying to support it, or people who were opposed to the same-sex marriage?
Oh, well, they always come up from people trying to support it because it's already illegal, so, there's nothing to oppose. They've all come up from people who are actually trying to exercise their constitutional right to marry whoever they choose.
In states that have not passed such legislation?
No, in states that have. You mean that have banned it? In states that have banned it.
I don't understand. What is this case that's coming?
All right. Well,
the court?
The Louisiana case was because Louisiana has a constitutional amendment prohibiting marriage other than between a man and a woman, and so there were 6 couples in Louisiana, 6 same-sex couples, who sued. They'd been married elsewhere, and they sued to have their out-of-state marriages recognized in Louisiana, not for the right to marry here, but just for the right for their marriages that were legal somewhere else to be given equal recognition here.
Which they have not gotten.
And they lost that in Louisiana. The judge here, it was Judge Martin Feldman in the Eastern District of New Orleans Federal Court, who was the first judge since last year, 2 years ago now, 2013's Supreme Court case for Edith Windsor. He was the first judge since then to rule against the right to marry.
Which you expect to be overturned?
Not in the Fifth Circuit, we don't. No.
You don't? You expect them to uphold that?
Yes. It is generally because the Fifth Circuit is known to be the most conservative appellate court in the country. And I think most observers would be very surprised if the Fifth Circuit...
Now, tell me if I understand correctly. Same-sex couples on a federal level, is that now legal federal? Can they file joint income tax returns?
If you are legally married in a jurisdiction that allows it, then you not only may but must file a joint federal tax return because you are legally married, even if you live in Louisiana, which says, oh, no, you're not.
But legally married people can file separate returns.
They can, but you have to file as married. You have to check the married.
Yeah, I understand. Now, so those states, which is now a majority of the states, that have approved statewide same-sex marriage, federally they are approved.
Yes.
states which have not approved it, you don't get the federal advantage?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And this is why it's very confusing. Let's say you live in Louisiana, okay, which says, if you're a same-sex couple, you're not allowed to get married. And under Louisiana law, the state will not recognize a same-sex marriage, even if it was validly performed someplace else. But under federal law, if you're married, you're married. And so if you got married in, California, maybe you lived in California and moved here, maybe you lived here and went there because you wanted the right to get married. If your marriage was valid where it was performed, under most federal law, certainly for the IRS, but not everything, you are treated as married. So it's a very convoluted, complicated mess, which is one reason, among many, why the Supreme Court is going to have to resolve it, because you're married here for some purposes, but you're not married there for other purposes. And in Louisiana, you got to file a married federal tax return, but you can't file a married state tax return, but you have to file state the same as you file federal. It's a mess.
All right. So the Supreme Court, I mean,
the Fifth Circuit,
the
Court of Appeals,
which is going to be here in this case in a few days.
Yes.
And you anticipate that they're going to uphold the
ban.
Prohibition.
Correct.
Then it's going to go to the Supreme Court?
I think without question it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
What else is going on?
So now we can talk about the legislature, which is most certainly not going to undo whatever bans they have on same-sex couples. But we've been working very hard on the criminal justice problem in Louisiana. We do still have the highest incarceration rate in the world here. And one of the things that we've been working on for several years, and I really do think, if not 2015, then almost certainly 2016, there's going to be a significant change to Louisiana's marijuana laws, which is not going to say legalization, okay? We're not looking at Colorado here. But most people don't know that under Louisiana law right now, on a third conviction for marijuana possession, and we're talking simple possession, small amounts, personal use.
The amount that you and I might have.
Simple, simple possession, small amounts, personal use.
Yeah.
You can face up to 20 years in Louisiana
for simple possession
on a third offense.
And are there people presently serving those?
Oh, yes, indeed. And more importantly, the DAs use it to extract plea bargains. So if they arrest you for something else and they catch you with marijuana too, then they will use the marijuana to extract a plea bargain for very long prison sentences. So it's really badly abused. And most people in law enforcement will come flat out and say they don't really care about the folks who are sitting at home, not bothering anybody, just smoking on a Friday night. They don't care about that. So if they don't care about that, then we ought not to have a law that says you can be sentenced for 20 years.
But now our legislature, which is so reactionary, you think they will nonetheless make some change to the marijuana law?
I don't think there's any question that they will, because for a lot of reasons.
That's encouraging.
For a lot of reasons. One is it's expensive. It's expensive to lock people up for 20 years.
Yes, but some of those people love to see people locked up.
Yes, but they don't like to pay for it. They don't like to pay for it. And when you start looking at the numbers, and when you start looking at a state that spends almost as much on criminal justice as it does on LSU, and we can't fund our schools, and we can't fund our universities, and we can't fix our streets because we're locking people up for 20 years for marijuana, people start to see that.
And doesn't Louisiana have the highest incarceration rate in the country?
No, in the world.
In the world?
In the world.
In the world. Well, I don't know about the rest of the world. Well, we certainly are number one at a few things, aren't we?
That's right. That's right. And, the ACLU sponsored a poll in September. We did one in 2013, and then we did another one a year later to see how opinions had changed in a year about marijuana use and sentencing. And what we found is that I think the number was 71% of the voters in Louisiana think that the maximum penalty should be a year with a fine.
Is this happening because there are more young people? Is it because young people are more likely to have that kind of position.
Well, obviously that helps, but I think there's also just a growing understanding that that we don't need to lock up people who have never hurt another human being
Exactly.
for long periods of time. It just doesn't make sense.
Even for short periods of time, if you
that's
haven't
right.
hurt anybody.
That's right. It just doesn't make sense. So we're looking hard at that, and I think there's sort of a growing momentum for that kind of change here. I don't know exactly what it'll look like. It will not be Colorado-style legalization, but it will be something that will make penalties far more civilized than what they are
our
now.
organization would support total legalization because we feel that people have the right to live their lives as they choose, so long as they are not hurting someone else in the process.
Well,
and I don't think smoking pot necessarily hurts anybody else.
Well, and the ACLU's position is aligned with that, but it's not realistic to expect that in Louisiana now.
You're right.
And honestly, I don't know that it makes sense even if it were realistic, because there are too many issues that are still being worked out in the states where marijuana has become legalized.
Oh, yes.
That it doesn't make sense to bring it someplace else until all of that's been worked out. Let them figure out how to advertise it, how to tax it, how to market it, how to do all of those things, and then once they've solved those problems, then we can export that model.
Well, and it's a cash business, and it has made some millionaires.
It has made some millionaires.
But they have a problem with the cash because federally it's still illegal to sell pot on a federal basis. It's still illegal. And as I understood it, the banks didn't want to take that money because it was ill-gotten money. Is that still the case?
That's been worked out. That
okay.
was worked out fairly quickly when there became a concern. It was a safety concern. People
It
had huge
was.
amounts of
They
cash,
did-
and of course that's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
The other related issue that we're working on would be to implement regulations for legalization of medical marijuana. Most people don't know that medical marijuana was actually legalized in Louisiana, I think, in the early 1990s.
And still on the books.
It's still on the books, but what happened was that it was subject to regulations that were to be implemented by the Department of Health and Hospitals, and that piece never happened. So while the law is on the books saying that it's legal, there's been no structure to implement that law.
But they could still do it now if they wanted to, could they?
Well,
Is it too old?
Not really, because the enabling regulations never happened. But last year there was a bill to fix that, and the sponsor of that, who's Senator Fred Mills from outside of Lafayette, who is a pharmacist, and he really understands this issue very well because he's a pharmacist. And he's advocating that again this year. It's going to be a different bill, and he's been working very hard on trying to get support for medical marijuana.
Okay, now other than the issue of pot, what else is going on?
Well, another thing, to take it away from the legislature a little bit, but some other work that kind of related work that we're doing is trying to stop the construction of overly large local jails. Because what happens is that, Louisiana has this very perverse system of funding jails, which is that we give sheriffs a certain amount of money per day for each person they lock up. So the sheriffs have an incentive to lock up lots of folks.
And make money, yeah.
Make money. And so there's been a movement by the sheriffs to want to build bigger jails. Because, if you build it, they will come. And they want to build them and they want to fill them. But at the same time, what's happening is, first of all, crime rates have been dropping dramatically in this country everywhere, and Louisiana too, in the past decade or so. And as we are revising sentencing laws so that we're not locking people up for as long, and crime rate is dropping, it's counterintuitive to say we need bigger jails to lock up more people when there are fewer people that really are being... So we've been working very hard to try and inject some sense into these conversations. We have one of our staff members who's serving on a task force in Terrebonne Parish on the jail construction and was appointed by the sheriff there to help guide that process, which of course is very important because she's a voice of reason and not just lock them all up. you know, and then there's always the race implications when you need to lock up a lot of people. We know who that is,
Yes.
who gets locked up, and then of course that creates all sorts of other problems, and then you end up with Ferguson, and so we're working very hard on trying to have reasonably sized jails that actually fit with what the community actually needs, what crime rates really are, what sentencing should be, and we're not just build this behemoth because money will follow.
Well, when you're talking about the racist aspect of this, when I read the daily newspaper, which isn't daily right now, and they show pictures of these people who have committed robberies and whatever, they're all black.
Well, that's a very complicated issue.
I'm sure it is, though, but because you say a little black child, what opportunities do they have?
Well, remember that 52% of the African American men in the city of New Orleans are unemployed. 52%. And many of them are unemployed because they have been sucked into the criminal justice system. When a white kid and a black kid commit the same offense, one of them gets sent home and the other one gets arrested. Everybody knows that. And so once you're in the system, then you have a criminal record, and then you get out, and then it's harder for you to become employed. And
you have to go back to the old ways.
If you can't make a living the legal way, you don't have a whole lot of choices but to make a living the illegal way. And so it's a whole system that is set up to perpetuate that problem.
What can be done about that?
Well, I wish, if I could wave a magic wand, I think a large part of it really has to come with awareness. It really has to come with awareness. It has to come with this sense that something is wrong. And people who know good and well that when their kids are out past curfew, their kids are going to be sent home versus somebody else's kid who's going to be locked up, you need to object to that injustice. You need to, not that you want your kid to be locked up if they haven't done anything harmful, but you need to protest that somebody else's kid will be.
Yes.
And you need to recognize that the system is fundamentally unfair in the way that it is implemented. And also, honestly, you need to recognize that when you have somebody who maybe has done a prison stint for whatever, and they've been released because they've done their time and they have been declared fit to return to society. And you need to then provide them an opportunity. There's no reason to say that person shouldn't be employable.
But does our prison system do any rehabilitation?
Some do and some don't. Better in the state system than in which is another problem with larger local jails, because the local jails don't do programming. They just have people sitting around, which is, of course, a recipe for disaster. In the state system, they do have programming, and they give people, vocational training and certificates in various skills, and those people can and should be employed.
Marjorie, our time is up. I thank
always too soon, Harry.
Thank you for being here. I thank you folks who are watching.
Thank you.
I hope we will see you here very often.